"We're sorry. We're fully booked. We only take guests with reservations." The cold refusal landed squarely on Amelia Johnson, the 50-year-old black woman who had just stepped into the Sterling Grand, the luxury hotel she herself owned. She had not come looking for fireworks or red carpets. All she wanted was a room key, a soft bed, and a quiet night before the board meeting the next morning. But instead of the basic respect she deserved, she was met with a dismissive tone and the impatient tapping of keyboard keys from the receptionist, Lily Torres. Amelia was dressed simply, grey slacks, a pale blue silk blouse, and soft loafers that made no sound as she walked. A canvas tote hung loosely from her shoulder. She bore none of the flashy trappings people expect from a million-dollar CEO. No entourage, no luxury car, no outward sign of power. Only the quiet confidence of someone who had weathered too many storms. Lily glanced up, lips pressed tight before releasing the familiar line. "There's no name in the system. I'm afraid you'll need a reservation to stay here." Amelia smiled faintly. Still polite, but in her eyes a spark of resolve began to flicker. She pointed toward the brass plaque on the wall. "Sterling Grand, a Johnson property." Her voice was calm, but each word cut sharp. "There is always a room held for me. I am Amelia Johnson. I own this place." For a brief moment, the lobby fell silent. A few guests lifted their eyes from cocktails. A man by the fireplace squinted curiously. Lily smirked, a smile caught between disbelief and mockery. To her, those words sounded like nothing but a joke. In her mind, power had to look the part. Designer coats, expensive jewelry, staff bowing at every step. That old feeling rose again in Amelia. Being doubted, dismissed, treated like she did not belong in the very place she had built. Without raising her voice, she replied, each word a stake in the ground. "I am not claiming it. I am truly the owner here, and I want to check in." Lily faltered for a second, then clutched the desk phone like a lifeline. "I'll call the manager." Her voice carried just enough for nearby guests to overhear, as if to expose Amelia's ridiculous claim. From the side door, Assistant Manager Noah Green appeared. His tie sat crooked, clipboard pressed to his chest, a stiff smile plastered on his face. He glanced at Amelia, then turned to Lily. "What's the issue here?" "She says she's the owner of the hotel," Lily replied, drawing out the word owner with mocking emphasis. Noah froze. Suspicion flashed across his face, though he tried to mask it with professional courtesy. "Good evening, Ms. Johnson, was it? Let me check the records. I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding." Amelia's gaze did not waver. Her voice was steady, deliberate. "There is no misunderstanding. My name is on every financial report, every board resolution. I need a room now." The lobby thickened with tension. A security guard quietly shifted to block the elevators. Another leaned against the cafe counter. They did not raise a hand, but the message was clear. You do not belong here. Amelia stood tall. She could have pulled out her ID or shown a photo from the grand opening 6 years ago, where she had cut the ribbon before hundreds. But she chose another way. She stepped back, leaned lightly against a marble pillar, drew out her phone, and dialed a familiar number. Just 26 seconds. "This is Amelia Johnson. I've just been refused check-in at my own hotel. Handle it immediately." She ended the call without another word. Then she stood still, calm, unshaken. No shouting, no recording. Her silence tightened the air like a drawn bowstring. Lily pretended to type at her keyboard, but kept glancing down at her own phone, searching. Amelia Johnson, Sterling Grand. Perhaps hoping to find proof, or praying she would not. She had no idea she was seconds away from colliding with a storm. Amelia looked around. She saw the sidelong stairs, the whispers they thought no one heard. And she felt that old fire rise again, the fire from 20 years ago, when a hotel security guard in Milwaukee had trailed her every step, unable to believe a young black woman could be an assistant vice president at a bank. And now, even as the CEO of a company that owned 18 properties nationwide, she was still being forced to prove her own existence. A sharp ding split the silence. The elevator doors opened. 2 men in suits stepped out briskly. Brandon Ellis, Regional Vice President, and Marco Diaz, District Manager. Shock flashed across their faces. They knew exactly who stood before them. In an instant, the balance of power flipped. The ones who had laughed and doubted now stood exposed, stripped of their assumed authority. Amelia remained still, a faint smile brushing her lips. She no longer needed to prove anything. She only had to wait and watch as those who had dismissed her realized the truth, that the quiet woman they had looked down upon was the one who held their futures in her hands. Brandon Ellis hurried forward, his face tense, his breath uneven. "Miss Johnson, we sincerely apologize. There has been a mistake." His voice trembled slightly, though he struggled to maintain composure under the watchful eyes of the crowd. Beside him, Marco Diaz fumbled with his tablet, fingers moving rapidly. "Suite 1202 is being prepared immediately. A private car will collect you in the morning. Fresh fruit and espresso, as you prefer, have already been arranged." Lily, the receptionist who had mocked her moments earlier, turned pale. The blood drained from her face. She backed up against the directory board, her nails clicking against each other, her eyes darting away in panic. The atmosphere shifted. Minutes ago, Amelia was the one doubted. Now every glance, every gesture tilted toward her. Respect, guilt, unease. Amelia moved slowly toward the front desk. The sound of her heels echoed with deliberate force, like a drumbeat. She set her phone down on the counter, her eyes fixed ahead. "I will be checking into my suite on the 12th floor, as usual. And I want someone to confirm immediately that the room is ready." Brandon nodded repeatedly, signaling for a staff member to run off. Marco quickly added, "All incident reports will be on your desk within 15 minutes. Disciplinary procedures for the staff involved will begin tonight." Amelia turned to Lily. Her calm gaze alone was enough to choke the young woman's voice. Fear carved across Lily's face, her lips trembling with an apology that never left her mouth. "She will receive retraining, privately, with HR." Brandon tried to interject, his tone heavy. Amelia lifted her hand to stop him. "After I've rested, I will speak to her myself." Her words rippled through the lobby like a final decree. No one dared breathe too loudly. She turned and walked toward the elevator. Guests moved aside instantly. The man by the fireplace lowered his head. The group of women by the window stopped whispering. No one spoke, but their eyes had shifted. Doubt replaced by reverence. As the elevator doors closed, Amelia caught sight of Noah Green, the assistant manager, standing frozen. His shirt clung with sweat, his eyes unable to meet hers. The suite door opened. A faint scent of lemon and eucalyptus hung in the air. A tray of fruit was neatly arranged, the espresso machine prepared, and a hastily written card with the initials AJ sat on the table. Everything was in order, yet Amelia saw beyond the cleanliness. She searched for intention, for respect, for the spirit she had once instilled in this place, but deep in her chest, she knew something had eroded. Dignity. She sat at the edge of the bed, fingers interlaced. The scene replayed in her mind like a film on fast forward. Lily's mocking eyes, Noah's forced smile, the hesitation of the guards. Decades of building an empire, and still she had to prove she had the right to stand inside a building that bore her name. Memories rushed back, at 28, wearing an oversized suit, cheap heels blistering her feet, being shadowed by hotel security because she didn't look like a luxury guest. That day, only when the CFO came out to vouch for her did she avoid being thrown onto the street. And now, 20 years later, the same story was unfolding, only with new players. A sigh escaped her lips, not of physical exhaustion, but of spiritual fatigue. Her phone buzzed, a message from her personal assistant. "Everything is being handled. Do you want to issue a statement to the press?" Amelia stared at the screen, thoughtful. A single post online, and the entire ordeal would erupt, shaking the hospitality industry. But she typed slowly. "No, this is not a story for headlines. This is a lesson." Night fell outside the glass. The city lights glittered. Traffic stretched in glowing strands like fiery veins. Amelia poured herself a cup of espresso, sipped. Bitter, but bracing. She stepped onto the balcony, eyes scanning the narrow streets below. Strangers hurried with their lives, unaware that inside this lit room, a woman had just fought to be recognized in her own domain. A decision formed within her. Tomorrow, she would not settle for apologies. She would demand change. Not change on paper, but change in how staff saw and treated people. As she returned to the bed, she set her phone on the nightstand, whispering softly, "Tomorrow, we start again, and they will learn to see what they once overlooked." In the dim light, Amelia closed her eyes, surrendering to a restless sleep. But beneath that quiet surface, a fire still burned, the fire of a woman who would never let anyone else decide her worth. 6:30 a.m. The sound of heels striking the marble floor echoed through the hotel lobby, sharp and steady, like a call to order. Amelia Johnson stepped out of the elevator in a charcoal grey suit and a pearl white blouse. No canvas tote, no modest air of the night before. Only the commanding presence of a CEO accustomed to running an empire. The morning shift staff froze for a moment. The barista stopped mid-pour. The bellhop bowed lower than usual. No one said a word, but they all knew. The truth was out. The woman in simple clothes last night was, in fact, the supreme owner of Sterling Grand. Brandon Ellis and Marco Diaz were already waiting near the fireplace, each clutching thick folders and 2 cups of coffee gone cold. They had likely not slept. When Amelia approached, they sprang upright and bowed. She gave only a slight nod. No smile. no polite greeting. Amelia walked straight toward the small meeting room beside the concierge desk. Inside, 3 people were already seated. Noah Green, the assistant manager, his shirt wrinkled and face flushed. Lily Torres, the receptionist, eyes shadowed, fingers clenched so tightly they drew blood. And Marta Lewis, an HR representative from headquarters, calm and cold, with a notebook laid open. Amelia did not sit immediately. She stood at the head of the table, arms folded, gaze sweeping over each face. The air thickened. No one dared to breathe too loudly. Finally, her voice broke the silence, quiet but heavy enough to press down on every heart in the room. Does anyone want to explain what happened last night, from your perspective? Lily bowed her head, lips moving but no words coming out. Noah cleared his throat, but it caught in his chest. Silence. Amelia let it stretch, a taut rope tightening around the air. Then her eyes locked on Lily. You thought I wasn't the owner of this hotel, didn't you? Lily's voice trembled. I didn't think. I just didn't expect. Didn't expect that someone like me could own this place? Amelia cut in, not raising her voice, but each word honed like a blade. Tears welled in Lily's eyes. Yes, I was wrong. Amelia sat down slowly. Her voice dropped lower, heavier than any shout. Did I ever raise my voice at you? No, ma'am. Did I threaten anyone? No. Then why, simply because of how I look and the color of my skin, was I deemed unworthy of a room in my own hotel? No one answered. Marta scribbled in her notebook, but her eyes flickered with unease. Brandon interjected, tense. We've already drafted the disciplinary report. Lily will be suspended until retraining is completed. Noah will undergo an internal review. The process will begin today. Amelia raised her hand. I don't need an execution. I need accountability. The room loosened slightly, though the weight remained. Amelia turned to Lily. How long have you worked here? 4 months. In those 4 months, did you ever wonder how this hotel was built? Who stood behind it? Lily whispered. I assumed it was some corporation. Amelia nodded, her eyes steady. Most people think that way. But Sterling Grand was not raised by some faceless company. It was built from the 2 hands, from the times I was thrown out of lobbies, from the stares that dismissed me. I built it so that people like me and like you could walk in without fear of being judged. The room fell into silence. Her words were not just for Lily, but for everyone. Marta finally spoke. I will implement an inclusion program across the entire system. Amelia turned to her, eyes sharp. Don't turn it into a box to tick off. I don't need a script. I need real change. I need staff to know what respect means, especially when they think no one is watching. Marco jumped in quickly. We'll revise the entire hiring process, adding unconscious bias checks. Amelia gave a small nod, then stood. The meeting was over. As she stepped out, the lobby seemed even tenser. Staff stood straighter. Guests observed in silence. But Amelia didn't look at them. She did not need outward displays. She wanted true change. Before leaving the room entirely, she turned once more, her gaze settling on Lily. After I've rested, I will speak to you privately. And when I do, I don't want excuses. I want a real promise. Lily nodded, shoulders trembling. The door closed. Amelia walked on, the echo of her heels reverberating through the hushed space like church bells. Inside her, anger had cooled, giving way to determination. If Sterling Grand had forgotten its founding values, she would make sure it remembered. Lunchtime. The staff break room tucked behind the mini-bar, usually filled with chatter and laughter, was strangely silent. On a small plastic-covered table, a half-eaten muffin sat untouched beside a phone face down. Lily Torres sat hunched, her shoulders curled inward, her hands twisted together. She barely touched her food. The door creaked open. It wasn't a manager, nor a colleague. It was Amelia Johnson. In an instant, Lily jolted up as if struck by electricity. Her chair clattered against the wall, the noise sharp in the cramped room. "Ma'am, Her voice shook, breaking apart. Amelia raised her hand, gentle but firm. "Calm down. I only want to talk." It wasn't an accusation. It wasn't rage. It was a steady, restrained voice, yet it carried such weight that Lily felt her feet rooted to the ground. Amelia pulled out a chair and sat across from her, placing her leather gloves aside. In that moment, she didn't look like the CEO commanding an empire, but like a woman seeking a genuine conversation. A few seconds of silence passed. The only sound was the hum of the old fridge and the flicker of the fluorescent light above. Amelia spoke. "Lily, have you ever worked a job where you felt invisible?" Lily blinked, caught off guard by the question. For a moment, old images returned. The flimsy paper hat from a roadside diner, the chef barking orders, customers calling her kid, even though she was 20. 7. Her throat tightened. Yes, most of the jobs I had before felt like that. Amelia nodded gently, her gaze softening. Then why last night did you look at me and decide I didn't belong here? The room froze. The words weren't harsh, but they exposed the truth Lily had tried to avoid. Her voice barely audible, Lily whispered, "I don't know, I thought you didn't look." Amelia tilted her head. "Didn't look like what?" Lily swallowed hard, her face burning. "Didn't look like someone who owns a hotel." Amelia did not respond right away. She leaned on the table, her voice deliberate and calm. "That is the problem, Lily. People carry a picture in their heads. A man, white, middle-aged, wearing a tailored suit and an expensive watch. Anyone who doesn't fit that mold is dismissed. And last night you made me a stranger in my own house." Tears slid down Lily's cheeks. "I'm truly sorry." "I didn't mean to." Amelia cut her off, her tone heavy with emotion. "I don't need your apology. I need you to see the truth. I used to be you, Lily. I once stood behind a front desk too, called sweetheart instead of by my name, looked down on by colleagues. I chose not to give up. I built these walls so that people like me and people like you could work in a place of respect. And last night, you betrayed that ideal." Lily sobbed quietly, her head bowed. Inside, shame weighed heavy, crushing her chest. Amelia sighed, then spoke slowly. "Did you know, at 33, I was mistaken for a janitor in the very company where I was a vice president? They handed me a mop, and I took it. Not because I accepted it, but because I knew one day I would walk into the boardroom and sit at the head of the table. I wanted them to remember that moment and wonder how they could have been so blind. The small room seemed to shrink. There was no barrier of boss and employee now. Only two women, one who had been underestimated, one who had just made a grave mistake, facing each other. Amelia stood and placed a hand gently on Lily's shoulder. You don't have to be perfect, but you must learn to see the value in others. Every guest who walks through these doors, young or old, lavish or modest, deserves the same welcome. Lily nodded rapidly, tears streaming down. I promise, I'll change. I'll never judge anyone like that again. Amelia held her gaze as if engraving that promise into memory. Then she stepped back, gathered her gloves, and walked to the door. As the door closed behind her, Lily collapsed into her chair. Her chest ached with shame, but within it glimmered a faint light, the chance to make things right. Out in the hallway, Amelia paused, eyes closed. Deep inside, she felt lighter, not because she had asserted her power, but because she had planted in a young mind the seed of change. In the glittering world of business, it was these small conversations that shaped the future. And Amelia knew this was only the beginning. That afternoon, in the executive office of the Sterling Grand, the air was heavy as stone. Towering glass windows looked out over the busy streets of Des Moines, traffic rushing by. But inside, every breath felt trapped. Amelia Johnson sat at the head of the long conference table, clad in a charcoal suit that framed her steady figure. Her eyes swept across the bowed heads of those seated before her. Brandon Ellis, Regional Vice President, Marco Diaz, District Manager, and Marta Lewis, HR Representative. In front of each of them sat a thick folder marked with glaring red tabs. We will not be talking about revenue today, Amelia began, her voice warm in tone but cold in weight. We will be talking about values that have been buried. Brandon swallowed hard, then quickly slid a folder toward her. We've prepared a disciplinary plan. Receptionist Lily will be suspended. Noah Green will be considered for termination. All staff will be required to attend retraining sessions on customer service. Amelia flipped through a few pages, her eyes scanning swiftly before closing the folder. Do you think all I need is a list of punishments? The question pierced the air, making Marco shift uncomfortably in his seat. Marta sat upright, pen poised but unmoving. No, Amelia continued, I want something deeper, a root change, a reform. If Sterling Grand has forgotten why it exists, then I will force it to remember. She rose and walked toward the window. Her reflection stared back at her from the glass, powerful yet solitary. I built my first hotel when I could barely afford a cheap suit and shoes that cut my feet until they bled. I did it to prove that luxury service doesn't belong only to the privileged few, but to everyone. Yet now, our own employees have turned their backs on that spirit. Her voice was firm, but her eyes glimmered with pride laced with bitterness. Brandon spoke up quickly, words rushing. We can launch a special 3-week training program, emphasizing inclusion and equality. I will personally supervise. Amelia raised a hand to stop him. Do not turn it into another box to check on a spreadsheet. I don't want scripted exercises. I want every employee to understand what respect means, especially when they think no one is watching. Finally, Marta spoke. I can redesign the entire hiring process, adding unconscious bias testing. We can select people not only for their skills, but for their empathy. Amelia turned back, nodding. Good, but not enough. I will personally take part in final interviews. I want to hear how they speak, how they look people in the eye. I want to know if they can show respect to a guest who walks in wearing worn-out shoes. Marco added hesitantly. We could also issue a memo across the system, requiring each branch to restructure its guest welcome protocol. No, Amelia cut in, her voice sharp as a blade. I don't want a memo. I want action. Starting next week, I will make unannounced visits to other properties, disguised as a regular guest. No one will be warned. I want the truth, not a staged performance. The room fell silent. Brandon and Marco exchanged uneasy glances. The thought that the owner, the one holding their futures, could appear at any location at any time sent shockwaves through the system. Amelia paced slowly around the table. We've let tiny cracks become chasms. Our staff believes that power wears Armani suits and drives Bentleys. They have forgotten that real power lies in how they treat each guest. If we don't fix this, the brand will collapse from the inside. She stopped behind Brandon, her voice low but heavy. I don't need more apologies. I need commitment. Can you give me that? Brandon nodded quickly, sweat beading on his forehead. Yes, ma'am. I'll begin tonight. Marco added, I'll schedule direct oversight for every shift. No employee will be overlooked. Marta closed her notebook, her eyes steady. We will rewrite the history of Sterling Grand, and this time it will be written with truth. Amelia allowed a faint smile, though her eyes still carried shadows. Good, because if we fail, I will not hesitate to wipe the slate clean and rebuild from the ground up. When the meeting ended, Amelia stood alone in her office. The city outside buzzed on, cars streaming endlessly, but she knew that from this moment forward, Sterling Grand would no longer be a sanctuary of luxury for the elite. It would become a measure of dignity for every soul who passed through its doors, staff and guest alike. She placed her hand on the open folder before her and whispered, Change does not begin with press releases. It begins here, in every glance, every greeting, every small decision. The afternoon light spilled through the glass, casting her shadow long across the floor. A shadow unyielding and unshaken of a woman who had been dismissed many times, but never once defeated. Late afternoon, the lobby of the Sterling Grand glowed with the golden light of sunset, streaming through the massive glass panels, stretching across the marble floor like streaks of fire. Guests moved in and out in a steady flow, rolling suitcases clattering, voices rising in cheerful chatter. But beneath the noise, Amelia Johnson could feel another silence, the taut, uneasy silence of the staff. She stepped out of the elevator. Instantly, every eye turned to her. Staff bowed their heads in greeting, their posture straighter than usual. A bellhop hurried forward, but Amelia raised her hand. I can manage. Her voice was calm, but the message was clear. I am not here to be celebrated. I am here to observe. At the reception desk, a new face stood ready, a young man with a badge that read Ethan. He bowed slightly, smiling warmly, his voice steady. Good afternoon, Ms. Johnson. I hope you're having a wonderful day." No hesitation, no doubt. Only natural respect. Amelia gave a small nod, her eyes softening for a brief moment. But then she noticed Lily Torres in the background. Lily was not handling guests directly, but stood stiff, clutching a stack of files as if they were a shield. Every so often, her eyes flicked toward Amelia, only to dart away again. Amelia stopped in the center of the lobby. Guests sensed the change in atmosphere and quieted. Brandon and Marco appeared at a distance, signaling staff to adjust their positions as though preparing for a performance. But Amelia lifted her hand. No staging, no rehearsed gestures. She wanted the truth. An elderly couple entered, dressed plainly. They hesitated at the threshold, their eyes uncertain, as if bracing for rejection. Ethan immediately stepped forward, bowing slightly. "Welcome. May I help you check in? If you prefer, I can arrange a quiet room on a middle floor for your comfort." Amelia observed closely. This was exactly the change she had been waiting for. No judgment based on appearance, only attention to genuine needs. A faint smile touched her lips, but just as she felt reassured, she caught a whisper from behind. "If it had been me yesterday, I would have told them no reservation, no room." It was the voice of another female employee, speaking softly to a colleague, but it reached Amelia's ears. Anger flared, though she showed none of it. She turned, her voice calm, but edged with steel. "What did you just say?" The employee's face drained of color. She stammered, I didn't mean, I was only—" Amelia cut her off. "No need to explain. Remember this. Every guest deserves to be welcomed. No exceptions." The lobby froze. Brandon looked ready to step in, but Amelia's glance silenced him. As the evening wore on, Amelia sat in a corner of the lobby, observing. Her espresso cooled, but she did not move. She wanted to see the small things, how staff greeted guests, how they handled unexpected requests, what kind of eyes they looked through. The more she watched, the more she realized. Change does not happen overnight. Some employees were making real efforts, but others were only performing, motivated by fear of being caught. She knew discipline could force behavior, but only belief could transform the heart. And that was why she had not yet spoken privately with Lily, the one who had committed the most serious mistake. Amelia wanted to give her time to reflect before facing her. At 8 p.m., the lobby quieted as guests dispersed. Amelia rose, gathering her notes. Brandon approached cautiously. "Ms. Johnson, are you satisfied with the initial adjustments?" Amelia met his eyes. "This is only the surface. I need to see the roots change. Tomorrow, we begin." Brandon nodded quickly, sweat beading at his temple. Back in her suite, Amelia opened the window, gazing down at the city, sinking into night. The glittering lights reminded her of years long past, working late shifts at cheap hotels, typing reports over paper cups of bitter coffee just to stay awake. She whispered, almost to herself, "They think I came to check on a room, but I came to check on a soul." Moonlight spilled in, soft against her face. No longer anger, but resolve burned in her eyes. Tomorrow would be the private conversation with Lily, a conversation that could change not just one employee's fate, but the way an entire system saw humanity. And Amelia knew that would be the most important moment of all. The next morning, as the rhythm of the hotel settled into place, Amelia Johnson left her suite. She did not head toward the main conference room, nor did she stop by the management office. Instead, she walked to the staff break room. Not a place of luxury, but a narrow space with plastic chairs, a stainless steel table, and an old humming refrigerator. Inside, Lily Torres sat alone. In front of her was a cheap cup of coffee, long gone cold. She tapped her fingers lightly against the table, her eyes red from a night without sleep. When the door opened and Amelia stepped in, Lily jolted to her feet, nearly dropping the cup. "Miss Johnson," her voice broke. Amelia raised a hand, calm but firm. "Sit. This isn't a hearing. This is a conversation." Lily sat again, trembling. Her hands clasped so tightly they turned white. The room was silent, filled only with the faint buzz of the fridge and the flicker of a tired fluorescent bulb overhead. Amelia's gaze fixed on Lily, steady but deep. "Lily, have you ever felt small in a job? Felt invisible, as if no one truly saw you?" The question pierced straight into Lily's chest. Images came flooding back. Long shifts at a highway fast, food joint, customers calling her kiddo, though she was well into her 20s, the chef shouting, the smell of grease clinging to her hair. She nodded slightly, her voice a whisper. "Most of the jobs I had felt like that." Amelia nodded. "I was there too. I once sat behind a reception desk, mistaken for cleaning staff, called sweetheart instead of by my name. But I endured. I learned. I used every moment of being dismissed to build these walls." Lily's eyes filled with tears. I was wrong not to recognize you. I didn't mean—" "It's not about recognizing me," Amelia cut in, her voice low but firm. "It's about not recognizing the person. When a guest walked through the door, you didn't see them as a customer, as someone worthy of respect. You only saw appearance, clothes, skin color, and decided if they were worthy or not." Tears rolled down Lily's cheeks. "I'm so sorry. I don't know why I assumed that way. I never wanted to hurt anyone." Amelia leaned forward, her words deliberate. "Sorry isn't enough. I need you to understand the weight. When you turned me away, it wasn't just a mistake. It was a repeat of the hundreds, the thousands of times people like me have been pushed aside. You became part of that cycle." Lily broke down, covering her face with her hands. There were no excuses left. Silence filled the space, not the silence of blame, but the silence of realization taking hold. Amelia let her cry, then spoke again. "You can change. Starting today. You must learn to see customers as who they truly are. People. Old or young, rich or poor, elegant or plain. Every single one deserves it." Lily lifted her head, eyes swollen but glinting with determination. I promise. I'll never make that mistake again. I'll treat every guest as if they are the most important." Amelia gave a faint smile. "That's only the beginning. A promise only matters when you turn it into habit. Every day, with every guest, you will have to prove it." She rose, picking up her leather gloves. Before leaving, she placed a gentle hand on Lily's shoulder. "I was once you, Lily. I know how it feels to be dismissed. Don't let yourself become the reason someone else feels that way." The door closed softly. Lily sat frozen for a moment, then released a long breath, as though a weight had lifted. The coffee cup on the table was still cold, but inside her, a small fire had just been lit. The fire of a second chance. Outside, Amelia walked down the quiet hall. She felt no victory, only relief, because instead of punishment, she had planted a seed, and she believed that if one person like Lily could change, the entire system could change. In her heart, Amelia reaffirmed it. The Sterling Grand would no longer be a place of false smiles. It would be a place where every person was seen for their true worth. That morning, the executive boardroom of Sterling Grand was heavier than a stormy night. Deep crimson velvet drapes were drawn tight, and the glow from the ceiling lights spilled onto the long, polished walnut table. Brandon Ellis, Marco Diaz, and Marta Lewis were already waiting, each clutching a thick folder, their faces tense as if they were about to stand trial. Amelia Johnson entered, her steps sharp and deliberate, the pinstriped black suit wrapping her in an aura of authority. She did not sit right away. Instead, she stood at the head of the table, both hands resting lightly on the wood. Her gaze swept across their faces, making each of them feel as though their very core had been laid bare. "You all know why I called this meeting," Amelia began, her voice slow but striking like a hammer. "What happened last night was not an isolated incident. It was a symptom, and we will not just bandage the wound. We will perform surgery." Brandon swallowed hard, trying to steady his voice. "We've prepared a special training plan, 3 weeks straight, focused on service culture and inclusion. I'll personally oversee it." Amelia lifted one corner of her mouth, not in praise, but in doubt. "You think 3 weeks is enough to undo years of ingrained thinking? No, Brandon. I want more than that." Marta laid her pen down and looked up. "I've drafted a proposal to restructure the hiring process. We'll add unconscious bias testing. We won't just hire skilled staff, we'll hire people who know how to respect others. That's the starting point." Amelia nodded slightly. "But not enough. I want to personally sit in on the final interviews. I need to look into their eyes, hear how they say a guest's name. One glance of disrespect, and they are out immediately." Marco spoke cautiously. "We could also send a company, wide notice, emphasizing our commitment to equality." Amelia raised her hand, cutting him off, her voice sharp and decisive. "No, I don't need glossy declarations pinned to the wall. I need action. Starting next month, I will appear incognito at properties across the country. No warning, no ceremony. I'll walk in as any guest, and I want to see the truth, not a stage performance." The room went silent. Brandon and Marco exchanged anxious glances. They understood this meant the entire system would have to stay vigilant, because no one would know when or where Amelia might appear. She continued, her voice calm but as sharp as a blade. "I was once turned away from a lobby because I didn't look like a VIP. I was once handed a mop instead of a key to a conference room. Those memories are scars that will never fade. I will not allow those scars to be repeated for anyone who walks into our hotels." Marta gathered her courage to speak. "We can redesign the entire training program. No more dull slides. We'll use real stories, real experiences, so employees can understand what it feels like to be rejected, to be dismissed." Amelia nodded, her gaze softening just a little. Yes. People don't change because of punishment. They change when their hearts are moved. Let them read, hear, and feel those stories. I want them to know the pain of a guest being dismissed, so they'll never want to cause that pain again. Brandon grimaced, hesitating. But some long-time staff may push back. They're used to the old ways. Amelia stepped closer, her eyes burning straight into him. If they cannot change, they will leave. I would rather rebuild from the ground up, with a smaller team who are genuine than keep a rotten empire standing. No one dared reply. She walked back to the head of the table and sat, her hands interlaced on the polished wood. From this moment on, Sterling Grand will stand as a symbol of respect. Guests who walk through these doors are not just buying a service. They are buying the feeling of being seen, of being acknowledged. If anyone on this team cannot deliver that, they have no place here. The silence stretched long. Only the scratch of Marta's pen broke it, recording every word. Brandon's forehead beaded with sweat, and Marco struggled to swallow the knot in his throat. Amelia exhaled, but her voice was steady. This is not revenge. This is a reminder. If I, the one who built this empire, can still be seen as not belonging, then how many ordinary guests have suffered the same? From today, that ends. She closed the folder in front of her and rose to her feet. This meeting is over. Prepare yourselves, because this is only the beginning. As Amelia walked out of the boardroom, the hallway stretched before her like a stage awaiting its next act. But this time, she would not stand above on the podium. She would walk among them, listening, observing. Because only when the shadows are exposed can a system truly change. She whispered softly, just loud enough for herself to hear. There is nowhere left to hide. Not for me, not for anyone. The Sterling Grand lobby at night wore an entirely different face. Warm golden light spilled across the marble floor, while soft jazz drifted from the ceiling speakers. Guests came and went in a steady stream, suitcases rolling, laughter echoing. But beneath the lively surface, Amelia Johnson could feel another silence. The tense silence of a staff that knew she was still there. She stepped out of the elevator in a navy suit, her gaze sharp yet composed. She said nothing, only took a seat in a leather chair near the window, an espresso cup in her hand. Everyone understood she was watching, and that silence weighed heavier than 100 shouted commands. Ethan, the new front desk clerk, once again revealed his true character. When a middle-aged man in a worn shirt dragging a frayed suitcase approached, Ethan bowed slightly and greeted him warmly. "Welcome to Sterling Grand. Let me check right away for the room that will suit you best." Amelia gave a small nod. Her heart eased for a moment. That was real change, respect without conditions. But just as quickly, she spotted a crack. At the counter nearby, another employee leaned toward her colleague and whispered, "If she weren't watching, I'd have said we were full already." Amelia set her espresso down and rose to her feet. The sound of her heels striking the marble froze the lobby. She walked towards the counter, her eyes locking onto the source of the whisper. "What did you just say?" Amelia asked, her voice low but carrying across the space. The employee's face drained of color, her lips trembling. No, I was just—" "No excuses," Amelia cut in. "Remember this. Customers should never have to prove their worth. We are the ones who must prove ours. Every time you forget that, this brand cracks another inch." The air went rigid. Brandon, standing nearby, started to step forward, but Amelia's glance stopped him cold. This was not something that could be patched over with scripted apologies. This was a lesson, delivered on the spot. For the rest of the evening, Amelia sat quietly, watching. She saw the younger staff trying harder, bowing deeper, softening their tone, moving with urgency. But she also saw forced smiles, sidelong glances in her direction, as if it were all just a performance. She scribbled into her small notebook, "Surface change, must go deeper." A boy of about 10 ran into the lobby, tugging on his tired mother's hand. Her shoes were worn thin, her expression hesitant as she approached the desk. Amelia held her breath and watched. Ethan greeted them. He knelt down to the boy's eye level and said with a smile, "Hello there. Do you want to head up to your room right away, or would you like a glass of orange juice first?" The boy's face lit up, and his mother bowed her head in gratitude. Amelia felt her heart soften. That was the moment she longed to see. Respect that came from the heart, not from fear. By 10 o'clock, the lobby grew quieter. Amelia rose and walked a slow circle around the counter, like a guest casually taking in the space. But in her mind, she catalogued every detail. The wary glances from some staff, the whispers half swallowed, and the rare, genuine acts of service like Ethan's. She knew change did not happen overnight. It began with small fractures, some old habits breaking apart, some new sparks being lit. Returning to her chair, she thought to herself, "This is the evidence. I don't need spreadsheets or reports. I just need to look, to listen, to feel." Close to midnight, Amelia went back to her suite. The air was scented with soft eucalyptus. On the table lay a thick training plan Brandon had delivered, but what caught her attention was a single folded note beside it. She opened it. The handwriting was neat, a little shaky. "Thank you for giving me a chance. I will change, not just for my job, but for myself. Lily." Amelia folded the note gently and placed her hand over it. A long breath escaped her lips, not of weariness, but of relief. That night, she sat by the window, gazing at the city lights flickering below. Her mind drifted back to her younger days, when she too scribbled promises to herself on scraps of paper, vowing never to let anyone else decide her worth. Now, a young employee had written the same kind of promise. And Amelia believed it was the first proof that the quiet revolution she had sparked was beginning to take root. Tomorrow would bring harder battles, but in this moment, between the glow of the city and that small folded note, she saw clearly. Change had begun. Dawn painted the glass walls of Sterling Grand with a soft pink glow. The city of Des Moines slowly awakened with the sound of car horns and hurried footsteps. Inside her suite, Amelia Johnson stood before the mirror, adjusting her ivory suit jacket and fastening the button. In the reflection, her eyes no longer carried the heaviness of last night, but instead shone with a quiet determination. She packed her belongings neatly. On the table still lay Lily's note from the night before. Amelia folded it carefully and slipped it into her leather bag. Not because she needed an apology, but because it was proof of what she believed. Change begins the moment someone dares to face their mistakes. When Amelia entered the lobby, the morning rush was already underway. Guests pulled suitcases on their way to conferences. Families asked for directions to the nearby zoo, and staff bustled between tasks. But something was different. The atmosphere no longer felt heavy. Every gesture, every greeting carried a sense of caution, yet also a newfound sincerity. Brandon Ellis and Marco Diaz stood waiting near the fireplace, files in hand, with Marta Lewis beside them, her face stern. They started to step forward, but Amelia raised her hand to stop them. "No more reports. I don't want promises. I want to see actions. And this morning, I have seen a few." Her gaze shifted to Ethan, the young clerk bowing politely to an elderly guest. His smile was neither forced nor fearful, but genuine. That was the spark Amelia had been waiting for. She turned back to Brandon, Marco, and Marta. "Remember, a greeting like that is worth more than any memo." Her heels clicked steadily across the marble floor as she headed toward the main doors. The doorman from yesterday, who had hesitated when letting in the guest without a reservation, now bowed deeply and said with heartfelt sincerity, "Safe travels, ma'am. I hope we see you again soon." Amelia allowed herself a small smile. "You will see me again, but not as today." The doorman looked puzzled, but she gave no explanation. Only she knew her plan to appear unannounced at other properties was already in motion. A sleek black car waited outside. Amelia stepped in, the door closing behind her. A rush of morning air slipped in for a moment before fading to silence. The car pulled away slowly, leaving the building that bore her name behind. She looked out the window as the city passed by. Small gas stations, modest bakeries, weathered signs. She thought to herself, in places like these live ordinary people, and each of them deserves the same respect as those who walk into sterling grand. Her hand touched the folded note in her bag, a simple scrap of paper, yet more powerful than any marketing campaign. It was proof that a word, a moment, could pivot the perspective of a human being. Amelia remembered her 20s, cheap high heels that blistered her feet, oversized suits, the times she was mistaken for a cleaner. Back then she had scribbled a promise on a piece of paper. "One day I will build a place where I, and all those like me, can walk in without having to prove our worth." Now, looking back, she had done just that, but the journey was far from over. Because even with 18 properties across the country, prejudice still lingered, simmering quietly like a fever that would not break. As the car neared the airport, Amelia closed her eyes, listening to the soft hum of the engine. A question rose within her. If this entire society still had not learned how to truly see people, what would she do? The answer came clearly. Keep moving forward. Keep showing up. Never ask for permission. Never bow her head. Step into every room as if the door already belonged to her. Because dignity is not a gift someone grants. It is something she has never lost. The car stopped at the domestic terminal. Amelia stepped out, adjusting her collar. The driver bowed, about to offer a farewell, but she was already walking ahead, luggage in hand, blending into the flow of hurried travelers. In the crowd, no one knew who she was. No one cared that she was the CEO of a hotel empire. She was once again invisible, just another passenger. But Amelia smiled, because invisibility itself was a reminder. She did not need recognition to know her own worth. And anyone who had ever been dismissed or pushed aside should know the same. Inside her heart, a message rang clear, as resonant as church bells. You don't need to shout to be heard. You only need to know who you are, and walk as if the door already belongs to you. Let others be unsettled, let them learn, let them regret, and when they finally see you, make sure they never forget. In a world where prejudice can creep in even behind the polished glow of a hotel reception desk, the story of Amelia Johnson reminds us that dignity is not something handed to us. It is something we hold firm within ourselves. If you believe that every customer deserves to be seen and respected, hit like to help spread this message. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next stories, where truth is revealed and justice is reclaimed. And I want to hear from you. Leave a comment with just 2 words, respect, to remind us all that no matter who you are, you deserve to be treated the same.